It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're fixing to have us a good day. Bring him in there.
This is Locked On Auburn. Zach and Michael here with you. Justin Ferguson of The Athletic and ESPN 1067 will join us in just a moment. We're having fun here on a Thursday morning. Hope you guys are as well. Beautiful day if you are in the Auburn or Opelika area. Absolutely stunning weather today.
Yeah, I hope I don't have to go outside, but it's nice to look at.
Sure. Right. So some exciting things happening in regards to Auburn. They will be taking on Memphis in basketball. How about that?
I'm pumped. That's great because Auburn has been going head-to-head in recruiting.
That's true.
With Memphis quite a bit lately. I think that'll be a great opportunity for Bruce Pearl to get out and show that he's a better coach than Penny and that he can beat Penny in basketball one-on-one and always has been able to, and that kids should come to Auburn instead of going to Memphis.
I think you're right. So just kind of looking at the press release here, the Auburn men's basketball team added a challenging non-conference opponent to its 2020 through 21 schedule, as the program is set to take on Memphis in the 2020 installment of the Holiday Hoopsgiving. Fun name. But yeah, so that will take place December 12th in Atlanta at State Farm Arena as part of a quadruple header that also features Dayton versus Mississippi State, Alabama versus Clemson, and LSU versus South Florida, and then, of course, Auburn taking on Memphis. So I'm excited about that. I think, Auburn has been going up against them in recruiting hard for some of these top-tier guys. And so, I think if you can say, hey, let's just settle on the court. Neutral site, mano-a-mano. Let's see who takes care of business, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know what? Maybe instead of doing the teams playing, they should just get the assistant coach's oldest daughters to go out there and play.
Okay, yeah. My money's on Maddie.
Yeah, I'll take Maddie Pruitt.
Absolutely.
All joking aside, though, I do think this is a great thing. And they're playing in Atlanta, right? That's what you said?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for Auburn fans to go, Auburn fans in Atlanta to go get to see the Auburn basketball team play.
Right.
It's right in a time, I believe students will be home, and a lot of them, live in Atlanta. And so hopefully Auburn will be able to get a pretty decent, pseudo student section out there. And I think it's going to be a really fun opportunity for the people, the students, and the players.
Before we bring in Justin Ferguson of The Athletic and ESPN 1067, I want to make sure everybody knows that today's edition of Locked On Auburn brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Amazing combination of low calorie, high protein, low sugar. I mean, there's no crazy additives. You actually read the label and it's like actual ingredients. You love that. So if you compare this to the most popular men's bar, it is half the calories, 7 times fewer carbs, 7 times fewer sugar, and more protein. So, I mean, the big question is, how can it be this much better for you and taste so good? I don't know. Magic? I have no idea, but it's delicious.
One of the things that always worries me when I see that something is 100 calories is that it's not going to fill me up.
Right.
Or it's not, I'll eat it and 20 minutes later I'll be starving again. It doesn't happen to me with Built Bar. I mean, I can eat one of those halfway through my afternoon when I'm getting hit with those early afternoon, please God, let me go home from works.
The day's starting to hit you. Yeah, absolutely.
That 3 o'clock feeling or whatever. I can eat one of those and it'll hold me over easily until dinner.
Absolutely.
Give me the energy to finish my day.
Yeah, so head to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, and get $10 off your first box. Once again, BuiltBar.com.
Hi, this is David Locke, the CEO of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'd like to take a moment to talk to our local business owners that are tuned into this podcast. At the Locked On Podcast Network, we want to see if we can do something to help you out in these difficult times. Here's what we'd like to do. We are going to drop all of our advertising rates on our local podcasts for local business owners half price. And in addition, we're going to take 10% of all of that revenue and donate it to the charity Frontline Foods. Frontline Foods takes money and sends it to local restaurants who are feeding frontline workers. Right now, those are the hospital workers. So again, local businesses, we're offering half-price advertising on our local podcast. We'll donate 10% of that revenue to Frontline Foods. If you are interested and this will help you out, please text advertising to 33777. Text advertising to 33777 or go to lockedonpodcast.com/advertising. Stay safe, stay socially distanced, and thank you very much for tuning into the Locked On Podcast Network.
Locked On NFL is the #1 daily NFL podcast with Brian Peacock and scout Matt Williamson. Locked On NFL has no offseason, so after this podcast, listen to Locked On NFL.
Justin Ferguson of The Athletic and ESPN 106.7 hanging out with us for a few minutes. How's it going, boss?
Pretty good. How are y'all?
Pretty good. So we need your help with something, and it sounds like it's good timing when we asked you this. Did not know this was happening because you got something up at The Athletic talking about a similar topic. But Michael and I have been talking about the different roles for Auburn's wide receivers and kind of the terminology and who is what and what are they responsible for doing. You've broken this down for me before on this show, but I feel like it's time for a refresher if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing here is I wonder how much of this might change with Chad Morris and kind of installing that system. But since they have both the same kind of backgrounds, I'm sure there'll be a lot of carryover.
All right, so let's start with like the main guy.
So really fast.
You have another question? Okay.
I just want to say we're probably going to focus on 4 main teams, 2010, 2013, 2017, and then now, 2019, 2020.
Okay.
So just a heads up there. If we start, I especially start throwing names at you and you're like, why are you asking me? That's why.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So let's start with the big guy. You're currently Seth Williams. Is that the same role that Darius Slayton had and then, like, I guess Darvin in 2010? I mean, are all kind of – all right, so break down that spot for us.
Yeah, that is most likely, for the most part, you'll see them at split end. It's called several different things. All of these are called several different things in Auburn's offense, but under Gus Malzahn loves to do if you read his book, his big thing is to number the positions. And the split end is also the 9. In very common football terminology, it's what you hear as the X receiver. Okay. In a standard Auburn formation, there's usually 3 wide receivers and either some sort of H-back or tight end on the field. This is the receiver that's usually by himself to the far side of the field. That is, in 2010, it was Darvin Adams. In 2013, it was Sammy Coates. It was Darius Slayton before it was Seth Williams. So that's kind of the guy that you want to go. He's kind of your number one. He's your go-to guy. He's the guy that you want to get in one-on-one coverage. He's the guy you feel like can do the most in terms of his versatility. He can beat you deep. He can run the post. A post is very, very popular from the X position in Malzahn's offense, especially those play-action shots they take. Recently, we've seen more back shoulder balls and stuff like that go into the X. This is your all-around number one guy. This is your Seth Williams, your Darius Slayton. When it was Slayton, it was more used of a speed position because that's what Slayton's game was. But now what we've seen in the recently with Seth Williams is that since he has such a strong all-around game, they're using it to be kind of like, we'll get you there on an island, and we'll try to attack the defense that way because if we isolate you, we feel like you can win one-on-one matchups.
Okay, so the fact that these different guys sort of do different things, like you said, Darius Slayton's more of a speed guy, and to me it certainly seems like Darius Slayton and Sammy Coates were used more as deep threats, while Darvin Adams and Seth Williams are used more on those kind of intermediate routes.
Possession guys.
Is just more of a play style thing. It's not because I don't know. To me, it looks like they're playing a different position. But
it's adapting to your skill set. It's the fact that those guys were better at certain things than maybe Darius Slayton and Sammy Coates were. And so, you use them a little bit more. You don't use Seth Williams as much as a deep guy because you have faster dudes on your team, a deep guy. Not to jump ahead too much here. I don't want to steal your guys' thunder, but one of the best examples of this is the other side of the field, the 2, the flanker, the Z, you would call them. Depending on, this is where you've seen the most versatility of the position these past few years, especially when Auburn, Do you guys remember last year when I think it was the Arkansas game when Auburn finally started playing Anthony Schwartz and Seth Williams on the field at the same time?
Yeah, that was a big deal.
It was a huge deal. And until then, they had both been kind of playing the X for the most part because, like, Michael, you were saying the speed guys, the deep threats you want to put at the X. Well, Malzahn had been using Schwartz there to run those deep balls while, Seth took more of the intermediate and shorter stuff that the X usually got. But you can put Schwartz at the Z, and that's where he started playing the 2. He started playing a good bit of that towards the end of the season last year. If he doesn't get hurt, he's probably playing there a lot, especially in the Iron Bowl. This is where you've seen a lot of versatility from Auburn over the years. This is where Terrell Zachary played in 2010. This is Ricardo Lewis's role basically in 2013. Sometimes you saw Ryan Davis here. This is where a little bit later we'll kind of get into versatility a little bit. Ryan Davis played here quite a bit. Eli Stove is also one who's played there a decent amount. And then I think the last couple of years and what you're looking at 2019, 2020, probably Schwartz, but also Eli Stove plays there a good bit. And it's your smaller, shiftier guys. When you think of the screen pass in Gus's offense, this is where those guys usually line up. These are also the guys who run a lot of speed sweeps. Like Ricardo Lewis, like Schwartz has done, like Stove did earlier in his career. So that's kind of what you're going to get out of those guys.
All right,
they are the smaller, shiftier outside guys.
So what about when they put a running back out there, like an Ontario McCaleb, or like I think you saw it more with McCaleb than Corey Grant. But I mean, is that essentially they're just putting them at flanker?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they'll put them out there and just say, in a certain set, in a certain formation, we'll substitute a receiver for a running back. Sometimes it's the slot guy, but a lot of times you could also see it being the flanker if you put them out real wide and motion them in. There are some plays last year that I remember seeing that Sean Shivers would do this a lot. He would start the formation out wide. Malzahn, or Nix before the snap would motion him in. And then the rest of the receivers on the field are usually their bigger guys. Usually they'd run that set with Seth Williams and, maybe a guy like Shedrick Jackson was on the field. This is a formation you would see Sal Cannella in a lot. So it's very versatile in terms of like who can you put in a certain formation in a certain situation. Malzahn likes to get creative with the substitutes a lot, but the foundation of the offense is still the same. The 9 is your outside receiver. The X is usually off by himself. In a 3-wide set, and then the 2 Z flanker, whatever you want to call it, is usually the one that lines up near the slot receiver in the formation.
Okay, and then they also will run speed sweeps and things from the slot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the slot receiver is, I guess, is it typically like? Okay, I'm sorry. Rephrasing the question. There's big slot and little slot.
Yep.
Why are they called big slot and little slot? Because I thought it was a size thing, and then I asked Zach if Shedrick Jackson was tall enough to be the big slot, like a big enough guy, and Zach was like, that's not why they call it big slot.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing about a Malzahn offense. Back in the day when they first started out, they ran a lot of 2-wide receiver sets, and your X and your Z were on the field, and then you see this sometime when Auburn goes to kind of more of a pro style personnel package. So the slot receivers go into two categories. You either got a big one or a little one. The big one is often referred to as the Y or the 5. That's also the position number for a tight end. So if Auburn has a tight end on the field, usually your slot receiver is a little guy, a 3. The problem with the 3 is that you've also heard H-back be referred to as the 3-back. So what we see a lot of times with Auburn is that sometimes they will put their tight end, quote unquote, they will line him up out wide as a big slot receiver. Sometimes they use it with versatility. Sometimes they have guys who can play both roles. You saw it a little bit with Spencer Knight. You saw it a little bit, with some other guys Auburn's played in the past. Cannella started his career doing this at Auburn. CJ Uzama is probably the best example of this. This is a guy who could split all the way out wide on certain plays because he was a tight end with that kind of versatility. More often than not, though, in Auburn's system, that is usually a big receiver. This is where Seth Williams started his career at Auburn. This is where you saw Cannella do a lot of stuff. I failed to mention J.J. Wilson was a guy who they moved around a lot. He played that position some as well. We'll see who that steps up and becomes this year. I think they've got a number of really interesting potential candidates there, but that is kind of what it's either your tight end or a big receiver who kind of detaches, you should say, but from the line and kind of plays kind of a big slot receiver role. The other slot is the 3, and why they call it the 3 is that in Auburn's offense, the 3 is usually the H-back, the 3-back. You've probably heard people refer to it as that in the past. Chandler Cox, Spencer Nye, all those guys, the 3-back. Now, when Auburn goes 4 wide, there's not an H-back on the field. And so the 3 in that sense splits out wide and becomes another wide receiver. So sometimes your 5 is a wide receiver. Sometimes your 5 is a tight end. Sometimes it's a big receiver. Sometimes your 3 can be as anything from an H-back to a small slot receiver. Early on in Malzahn's career, there was I remember there was a conversation one time where there was like some real confusion about like, hey, what position are you playing? And I believe it was Eli Stove once who said he was playing some of the 3, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like you're clearly not a 3. Well, you had to kind of learn that that's what they call the smaller slot receiver when he's in a formation like a 4 wide set that substitutes for a 3-back. So your slot receivers, that's kind of the difference in them, but they can be mixed and matched very, very much.
So basically on offense, Auburn's got like 15 starters, but they come in different person. Like it's all about substitutions and just saying like, I don't know, just trying to use names or whatever for positions is just not that simple.
And one of the things that really throws it off is if you look at Malzahn's offense, and I don't want to blow up his spot too much, but I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point. There is a PDF floating on the internet of his install of his offense when he was at Tulsa. So you can kind of look through it and kind of see. That's where I've learned a lot of his offense, that in his book. And you can kind of look and see, like, here's how he teaches certain formations and certain positions. Certain formations, the 2 lines up on the outside, and certain formations, it lines up on the inside. And sometimes it's versatile. Like, there will be some sets you'll see where, like, Seth Williams will line up on the inside. Well, he's no longer it doesn't mean he's not the 9. It's just in that formation, the 9 is lined up there. You see the 9 and the 5 are very versatile, and the 2 and the 3 are very versatile. So they can line up in certain spots depending on the formation. More often than not, the 9 and the 2 are the outside, and the 3 and the 5 are on the inside. But there are some special formations at Auburn where the 9 and the 5 switch a little bit, and then the 2 and the 3. And that's usually just to draw certain matchups or do certain things on the field where you want to, like, if you're wanting to attack the field a little bit better, the middle of the field a little bit better, you might put your 9 or your 2 closer to the line of scrimmage. It just depends on the formation. And that's also kind of what makes Malzahn's offense kind of unpredictable, because that's where he does. He learns so much about the art of deception and also, like, you don't want to telegraph your stuff. And you see that a lot in the way he lines up and uses motion.
We'll continue our conversation with Justin Ferguson next, right here on Locked On Auburn. We're taking a look back at the best year in Auburn football history.
This is for all the Tostitos.
Listen to our upcoming series, remembering and telling the story of the 2010 Auburn Tigers.
All this team does is win.
Relive Cam Newton's Heisman run.
That was extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
That kind of run makes you want to strike a post.
That was a Heisman run if I've ever seen one.
Auburn's opportunistic defense.
That's a safety. Intercepted. He'll run it in. Ball comes loose. Touchdown, Auburn. There's Bynes again. Intercepted in the end zone. And that's your ball game.
All the way from Jordan-Hare Stadium,
Glendale, Arizona. Here come the Tigers.
Hear the story told by Jason Caldwell, voice of the Auburn Tigers, Andy Burcham, Mike Sveditz, and more. The series will drop mid to late May on Locked On Auburn.
It's going to be on, it's going to be on, it's going to be on, and it's going to be insane.
This is NFL Under Review, local experts on the biggest NFL stories.
This is Brian Peacock with your National Football League update from Locked On NFL. The regular season is scheduled to kick off Thursday night, September 10th, as defending champion Kansas City Chiefs host the Houston Texans, but the commish says, quote, "We will be prepared to make adjustments as necessary, as we have during the offseason, in safely and efficiently conducting key activities such as free agency, the virtual offseason program, and the 2020 NFL Draft. One potential out early in the year is that every opponent in week 2 has the same bye week, so those games can be moved to later in the year, with week 1 games flipped to the end of the season. Goodell did not, though, elaborate on more drastic changes to the schedule if they are necessary. The league is currently operating as if all things will play out as currently scheduled, with training camp beginning in July.
For more NFL news, make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Aloha, this is Chad Ford, host of Chad Ford's NBA Big Board. I've been Peace Players' biggest fan over the past 15 years. Peace Players is a nonprofit that brings together young people in divided communities through the game of basketball. They, like so many other NGOs, are hurting in the wake of COVID-19. So we're kicking off the NBA Big Board Dangerous Love Peace Players campaign. I will be donating all of my profits to my new book, Dangerous Love, over the next 2 weeks if you pre-order the book at dangerouslovebook.com. Go to dangerouslovebook.com to help an important world-changing cause.
Justin, has there been a moment, and I guess the more recent, the better for this question, but has there been a moment where you've been covering the game and you see a personnel grouping come in, you see guys standing in a certain place, and you knowing kind of the ins and outs of this offense better than I think anyone in the media does? Do you look at it and you're like freaking out, like, wait, we haven't seen this before, and like most people are just kind of like, okay, so and so's in.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few times that stand out to me that were, I think when we haven't seen anything like that before, kind of stood out. I mentioned that Arkansas game earlier. I felt like I was in the press box in Arkansas when Schwartz and Williams got on the field for the first time together. It felt like, and I was like, oh wow, they finally did it. Like this is something that like people had been asking Malzahn about for forever, and it's like, all right, let's see how they line up Schwartz. Let's see how they do a lot of things. I will say, though, that there are some times when, like, there will be certain formations on the field that I can be like, oh, I know what kind of play they're about to run, or I know what kind of sets they're probably going to try to run out of this. And probably the best example of it, and this is one of the few times I've ever been able to say that I can do this. I called the play that Sal Cannella caught for a touchdown. I believe that would have been the Iron Bowl. He caught one in the Iron Bowl, right? Yeah. He caught that because it was the same play they had ran against Washington 2 years earlier. It was a big set with a tight end and an H-back, and they put Sal out wide and they put Seth out wide, and it's the little comeback ball that it's about a 15-yard back shoulder ball to the corner of the end zone, and it's that same formation, and it just kind of clicked, and I was like, oh, if they put Sal out wide, this is usually where they try to isolate those guys on the outside and hit a play like that. And it's just a special formation. So you start catching up on some things like that. You start picking up on, okay, if this guy's lined up here, this is where you're going to see. And then sometimes Michael asked earlier about, putting a running back out there. Last year, that was kind of the big adjustment for you because they had so many running backs on that team that they started trying to put Shivers. Harold Joyner did it some where they would just line him up at wide receiver and like throw him in motion. I know I know you guys here are a big fan of him, but Spencer Nye was like that for me as well. Cause like you would see Spencer Nye lined up. There would be some times where he would be outside in a double stack. I'm like, what are they doing here? There was one time where they lined up Spencer Nye out wide in like a double stack formation, with one guy in front, one behind. And usually it's like, okay, you're going to throw a screen pass out there and then let him go. Well, then this one play they ran, Nye was lined up as the backside receiver. And I remember in the press box lane, I was like, surely they're not about to run a pass play for him in this set. What they did is they ran a fake screen and a double move off of it for the other receiver who was out there. So it was just little creative things like that you start to pick up on more and more when you watch it. And that's the thing is, like, I encourage anybody who, really wants to get into the weeds about Auburn football and dig into it. Read all that kind of stuff because it really opens it up once you start watching games on TV. You can really start. I think it really enhances kind of your understanding and maybe if you're a fan, the enjoyment of what you get from Auburn's offense. When it works.
Mm-hmm. I assume you've looked at this. I may be throwing something at you that you haven't prepared for this, but as far as I assume you've looked at Chad Morris's offense from last year, the last 2 years of his time at Arkansas. I mean, what do you see that's different that could possibly make its way into Auburn's offense regarding the wide receiver position?
Yeah. There's a lot of it is kind of the same at the core, especially in terms of the running game. But you do see the difference in the passing attack. And one of the things that we see more of from Chad Morris, and I think it's the big one, it's the one that everyone's talking about, it's the one that Gus has referenced a bunch of times, is that he uses the tight end a lot. When he wants to go 3 wide receiver with an extra man, I haven't figured out a better way to rephrase it. I just call it the extra man, either the H-back or the tight end. He uses the tight end a whole lot more than the H-back. Okay. That really fits in with what Auburn's going to do on with their offensive personnel. There's no more Chandler Cox. There's no more Spencer Nye. There's no more guys like that where that's a true traditional H-back. And Auburn ran so much H-back the last few years because they had good guys who could play that position and not as much at tight end. They have recruited so many tight ends recently. That's John Samuel Shanker's natural position. That's, of course, Fromm and Deal's natural position. They've got J.J. Pegues and Brandon Frazier now there. I think you're going to see a lot more tight end usage because I think this is a perfect culmination of offensive coordinator, and this is where the roster is being built. This is the trends that we've seen there. The other thing I've seen a lot more of is Chad Morris does not use the screen nearly as much as Gus Malzahn. One of the knocks on Malzahn's offense from the passing game perspective, especially when you talk to people at the next level, is for Auburn, a lot of times in the passing offense, it can feel like they're either running a deep shot or a screen pass. There's more intermediate balls, but also when Chad Morris wants to work the quick game, it's not necessarily screen passes. He does a lot of slants. He does a lot of drag routes. He does a lot of some of that air raid background running mesh and stuff like that, trying to get speedier guys catching the ball at speed, running full speed. And I look at that and I see that could be huge for Anthony Schwartz. Instead of him catching the ball from a standstill and a screen or maybe looping a little bit on like a tunnel screen or something like that, I think you'll see him a lot more on drag routes and slants and stuff like that. This is where I think you're going to see the biggest change. Maybe not as many screen passes, although there will be used some. You will expect them to be there. I think you'll just see a lot more of the quick game, and I think that fits Bo Nix's game a lot as well. I think Bo Nix is at his best when he can take the snap, make the quick read, and get the ball out of his hands quickly. I think Morris's background and the way he wants to use the route trees and the combinations in the same kind of framework of the offense fits these receivers and especially Bo Nix better.
Justin, my last question for you.
Okay.
You said all the positions have numbers. What's number 1? What's number 11?
Okay, so number 1 is the quarterback. I don't think 11 is one of the linemen, and I can't remember which one it is. But usually he wants to refer to the skill position players all as one. The running back is the traditional running back is the 4, and the quarterback is the 1. And I'm pretty sure 7, 8, 10, 11, and 6 are all offensive linemen, but I can't remember which one's which. I think they might be straight up like it bounces around. I've never understood why the numbers were the way they were.
And then 2 is the flanker. Got it.
Right. Exactly.
I'm back. Mm-hmm. I'm back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And did he get that from somebody? Do you know, or is that all him?
That's partly him, and that's partly some of his background. If you know Gus Malzahn's career, he didn't have really a coach to teach him much. He was a head coach by the second year he was in as a high school coach.
Right.
And one of the things he did was he bought a book that was written by Tubby Raymond, who used to be the coach for forever at Delaware. He was there for 30 years, about the wing T. And some of that numbering kind of bled over to what Gus did early on in his career. Gus, if you could watch Gus's early offenses, they just ran a traditional wing T, straight out of 1950. And then the more he got into it, the more he started learning from more people, the more they started implementing the shotgun and stuff like that. So I think the numbering system kind of came from that, where he was trying to keep up the same kind of numbering, that kind of format, but wanted to bring it into more of a modern offense, and that's where that kind of necessitated from.
Sure. Yeah, and I know the numbering's a little weird. When you talk about where defensive linemen line up. So I don't know. This is kind of
I've always had a harder time remembering that more than like when. That's the one thing I feel like I fraud most of the time when talking to coaches or talking to people who like draft people.
Yeah.
When we're like, this guy can play 3 techniques, 5 techniques, and I'm having to sit there in my head like thinking like, okay, what does that look like? What does that look like?
It goes like 4, then 4I, and then 5, then it jumps to 7 if you go outside the tight end. Yeah, it's all kinds of weird stuff.
And the Seahawks ran the wide 9s for forever, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to figure this one out. Mm-hmm. It's crazy because, covering this team for so long, I'm just used to thinking, okay, are you a defensive end or are you a buck? That's pretty much the difference there.
Well, man, folks, if you're listening, I mean, you can get all kinds of breakdowns that Justin does at The Athletic. Justin, tell folks what they can look forward to with all of your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Read my stuff at theathletic.com. We're doing a 90-day free trial if you haven't signed up for us in the past. So check that out right now, and you get access to everything we have on the site, not just our college football stuff, not just our Auburn stuff. And the story I wrote honestly today on Thursday kind of ties into this. And just to sell it to you real quick, a lot of people have a lot of Gus and the coaches and the players have a lot of confidence in Auburn's offense in 2020 because Bo Nix is coming back. And of course, you want to return a starting quarterback. That's a huge thing. But statistically, if you look at Gus Malzahn's history at Auburn, it's more important to return experience at wide receiver than necessarily quarterback. And I kind of break down why that is and why that could be a good sign for Auburn in 2020.
I'm sold. I'm headed there right now. As you should as well if you're listening. So, Justin, thank you so much, brother. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
All right, we will wrap up the week tomorrow right here on Locked On Auburn.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.